In this video, I'm going to address something that was brought up to me here on the channel. What someone was describing is that they have an ex who comes around for money, and that they have discerned that this person is asking for money for cigarettes or beer or both, that they've been abusive in the past, and that she told him no due to feeling conviction that she's contributing to something that's hurting his health. And so she's asking for me to discern with her whether this is the right way to handle this. Here's what I would say. We have to discern these things with God all the time. And, she did start out by saying that she has prayed about this and she believes that she's discerned this with God. The Bible does say, do not resist your enemies. It does say that if someone is trying to steal from you, to give them even more. If they're trying to sue you, give them even more. I do not believe that what the Bible is saying is give to someone so that they can hurt themselves. I believe what God is saying is that if someone is in need, and if they're stealing, if they're stealing from you, perhaps they're in need. It's not the right way to handle it, but perhaps they're in need, to give to them. But I also don't think that if someone is suicidal and they're asking you for, something to hurt themselves, that the Bible is saying, give them your knife. Go ahead, give them your knife. You know what I mean? And this is a form of slow suicide when someone is using drugs and you clearly have discerned by the Spirit that giving to this person is that they're using that in order to harm themselves. I don't believe that the word is telling you to keep giving to them. That person shows up and they're hungry, give them something to eat. They're thirsty, give them some water. But I do not believe that the word is telling you to keep giving to a person who is putting themselves in danger and potentially other people. The basis by which we're giving to people, the basis by which we're doing these things that God has commanded us to do, is in order to become holy as God is holy. And God does not do for us what we're supposed to be doing for ourselves. He doesn't keep giving to us simply because we're lazy or we're going to go out and hurt ourselves with what he's giving to us. He does not do for us what we're supposed to be doing for ourselves. He does not enable us for bad behavior. And you might say, well, giving to someone who's stealing from you is enabling bad behavior. And I can see where someone would be coming from when they're saying that. But the issue there is so that person will be brought into understanding and shame over their behavior. And so that God will testify through his own people, holy Christian life. But there are different factors here when we're talking about someone who is harming themselves and putting others in danger. I do not believe that God continues to enable someone to harm themselves and put others in danger. I believe that he sends logical consequences to us and that we should not be positioning ourselves so that a person is getting from us what they should be getting from God. In this situation, I do believe that this has the potential to become an idolatrous situation. With what I know about, people who are using drugs, have a spirit of what the world would call addiction. This is a spirit of insatiability, compulsion, indulgence. So again, I think that this is kind of a tough one. It needs to be discerned with God. One thing that I know God has done with me is that he's had me giving to people and he's had me giving mercy. But there have also been times where God has said no more, where he's had enough of that person and he tells me no more. So again, these decisions really have to be made side by side with God. From my personal experience with him, there's probably confrontation that needs to happen here. And what I mean by that is honest and direct reproval. That is probably more appropriate than continuing to hand money over to someone who is hurting themselves. The key in all of this is love. Everything that God has commanded, there's got to be love. If you're doing it with rejection and hatred and all of these other things, that's not going to work. It needs to be done in love, letting them know, I care about you. I'm concerned for you. I'm not going to give you this money anymore, if that's where God is leading you. The other thing that you need to take a look at is what is the heart with which you're giving that money? A lot of times, most of the time, when people are giving money or enabling someone who has this spirit or these spirits, they are taking the position of idol. They're standing in the way of what God needs to do in that person's life. And they are keeping that person in a position where they don't have to experience the logical consequences that God is sending in their life. And I've seen that over and over when I was doing quote unquote addiction therapy. Over and over. People taking second mortgages out on their house so that they can send their family member to Club Med where they can go do yoga and get energy healing and all of this other stuff, than to just come out and go do it all over again. So is this helping? Is it being done in love, or is it being done in idolatry? Have you decided before God what's best for this person? I do not believe that it is helpful to someone who has these struggles, these spirits, to keep receiving the means to continue that behavior and to avoid logical consequences of what they're doing. Above all, what I would do is I would pray and fast for that person. Pray and fast, and you're going to watch God bring him low. That's been my personal experience, that when you pray and fast for someone who is in that kind of bondage, remember that God says, is not this the fast I have chosen? And he goes through all of these reasons why it is that we fast. When you're fasting, you should be praying for the people who need help. You should be leaning in for them, for those who are in bondage, and God's going to move. There's more power in that than any of the other behavioral stuff. And if you do that, God's going to direct your paths. I hope that helps. I know that I don't have necessarily a direct answer for you. That's my personal experience with God. But I think that's by design. I really do think that these things need to be discerned with him above all. And that there are going to be a lot of, it's not just like not giving them the money, right? It's also the interactions that you have with them. There's so much tied into this type of a relationship that's going to need to be addressed with God. The last thing that I would say is that the word also tells you not to have anything to do with people who choose to live like this. This is clearly a person who's chosen to live in darkness. And the word says have nothing to do with those people. So I also believe that you're going to need to ask yourself some questions about why you're still in proximity to this person. Why are you still relating with them? I don't know if you have kids together or something like that, but even when you have kids together and you have a co-parenting relationship, this is a little bit more of a relationship than you would have with someone with whom you're, co-parenting. Most co-parents are not giving money to the other parent for these kinds of things. So that's something to also take up with God. How do you need to reposition yourself, reposture yourself in relationship with that person, or not in relationship with that person? Thank you for the question. This is a tough one. These are, harder things. And I believe there are going to be more difficult questions that are coming up on the channel, because God is really activating those people who have those greater debts, who are in situations like this. And I'm hearing your stories. I'm hearing your stories of addiction. I'm hearing your stories of losing children, babies, as a result of that. I'm hearing all kinds of stuff that people have engaged in. And you know what? You're the ones who are going to love him more. You have a greater debt than that lazy, lukewarm old church that's being cut off right now. The ones who, didn't provide a place for you to come because they didn't want you reflecting on them. The ones who looked down their noses at you and gossiped about you. You're the ones he wants. Someone who used to listen to the channel and used to come to the groups and stuff said to me, I thank God that I never was a crackhead. I never prostituted myself. I never did any of these things. Knowing my story, knowing bits and pieces of my story would say that. And I used to think, what does all that matter? What does all that matter to God? You think that God cares about all of that? You think that's going to be to your credit? The places you've been are not to your credit. It's what you've done in your heart. And those who have the greater debt are the ones who are going to love him more. But that's what counterfeit Christianity does. Oh, thank God I've never done this. Thank God I've never done that. I'm so righteous. Luke 18, verse 9. To some who were confident of their own righteousness and looked down on everyone else, Jesus told this parable. 2 men went up to the temple to pray. One a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee stood by himself and prayed, God, I thank you that I'm not like other people, robbers, evildoers, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week and I give 1/10 of all I get. But the tax collector stood at a distance. He would not even look up to heaven. He beat his breast and said, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. I tell you that this man, rather than the other, went home justified before God. For all those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and all those who humble themselves will be exalted. Luke 7, verse 36. When one of the Pharisees invited Jesus to have dinner with him, he went to the Pharisee's house and reclined at the table. A woman in the town who lived a sinful life learned that Jesus was eating at the Pharisee's house, so she came there with an alabaster jar of perfume. As she stood behind him at his feet weeping, she began to wet his feet with her tears. Then she wiped them with her hair, kissed them, and poured perfume on them. When the Pharisee who had invited him saw this, he said to himself, if this man were a prophet, he would know who's touching him and what kind of woman she is, that she is a sinner. Jesus answered him, Simon, I have something to tell you. Tell me, teacher, he said. 2 people owed money to a certain moneylender. One owed him 500 denarii and the other 50. Neither of them had the money to pay him back, so he forgave the debts of both. Now which of them will love him more? Simon replied, I suppose the one who had the bigger debt forgiven. You've judged correctly, Jesus said. Then he turned toward the woman and said to Simon, do you see this woman? I came into your house. You did not give me any water for my feet, but she wet my feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair. You did not give me a kiss, but this woman from the time I entered has not stopped kissing my feet. You did not put oil on my head, but she has poured perfume on my feet. Therefore, I tell you, her many sins have been forgiven, as her great love is shown. But whoever has been forgiven little loves little. Then Jesus said to her, your sins are forgiven. The other guests began to say among themselves, who is this who even forgives sins? Jesus said to the woman, your faith has saved you. Go in peace. You know, it's a shame that when I was involved in counterfeit Christianity, I also felt a sense of shame and exclusion, never feeling like I belonged. There was not a place for me, even when you couldn't see necessarily on the outside who I'd been, what I'd done. But there was always some reason for exclusion. Oh, our small group is only for couples. Oh, okay. Well, I'm a new Christian. Is there another small group for me to go to? I mean, that literally is something that was said to me in counterfeit Christianity when I asked if I could attend their small group. You know, people who have not been in these positions, when the fire comes over, they don't feel the need. They feel exempt. That has been demonstrated over and over and over. They don't feel the need to engage in the covenant. They make up some covenant that doesn't even make sense. All that to say, you're going to see a very different presentation in God's church from here on out. And it has already started. Do everything in love. Don't condemn this person who's struggling. Lean in for them in ways that are going to matter. Fast for them. Pray for them. Be honest with them. God will work through that. Thank you for listening. Please discern this message with God.